Running, so picks ready and action.
There's a real puzzle as to why the Industrial Revolution occurred in England. You might have expected it to have occurred in Holland, France, Italy, Spain, or Japan, or elsewhere. But why England? One can think of various useful factors about England. It had a good economy, it had good agriculture and coal. It had a reasonable religious system, Protestantism. It had a good political and legal system, democracy of a kind, and legal framework. But even when you run through all this list, you're left with a sense of there's something missing, some X factor, extra thing. And possibly this X factor is a peculiar English invention, the English club. Now, what could be the relationship between a club and an industrial revolution? What is the link between them? Well, the club is a solution to a problem which is central to industrialization and science, which is how do you get people who are very individualistic in pursuing their own goals to work closely together? How do you maintain a balance between individualism and collaboration? Because without that, the complex phenomenon which we call a scientific and industrial revolution can't occur. It's too difficult for an individual to solve. It needs pooled social activities, and a club is a perfect way of doing this. What the club does is takes the lonely individual out of their library or their workshop or their political office and brings them together with their colleagues and friends in a special environment where they can share pleasure, enjoyment, but also serious discussion about all sorts of matters. They can sit round a table. And from the 17th century, in particular, when the clubs flourished in Britain, they can enjoy a new drink, coffee. Previously, there'd been all sorts of clubs and associations based around other kinds of drink, around beer particularly, and ale and so on. But the 17th and 18th century gave you tea and coffee and chocolate to drink together. And so you got the flourishing and the development of these clubs, particularly in London, but elsewhere. Now, the club is a very peculiar institution because it manages to combine choice. You have to be chosen to be in a club. It's very difficult to get in. You can be blackballed and kept out. So the boundaries are policed very carefully. You are chosen by other people, and this gives you a good feeling. I've been chosen to be a member of this special club. You yourself want to be a member, so you've chosen, and you have joined this club. Once you're inside, it's like being inside a fortress. It's protected against the outside world, and you all feel members. And being a member is more than just a choice. It is a way of life. You develop a kind of loyalty and commitment to your fellow club members. You trust them. You trust that they won't betray the secrets you discuss when you've been drinking and relaxing. You trust them to give you good information. And so you begin to get the pooling of knowledge, whether it's about literature, about games, about politics, about art, about science, the pooling of knowledge with others who have been specially selected to be ideally placed in their different fields to be at the forefront of whatever it is that you're going to discuss. So you sit back, you relax, you spend evening after evening, you bring new information from all over the world. In the 18th century, new information was coming in from all parts of Europe and the wider world. And you say, have you heard about what's happening over in Canada? Have you heard what they've discovered in India? Have you heard about this new invention that they've got in the south of France? What do you think? You know, you're a scientist, I'm an arts person, you're a manufacturer. How will we do this? How will we do that? You sit round, pool your knowledge and expertise, solve each other's problems, have a good time, maybe some betting, maybe some foolish games. You get into a kind of creative, innovative games playing mode, which allows real communication between people. It's very difficult to do as human beings, and yet it's the essence of almost everything that human beings have done creatively. It's like being a member of an orchestra, for instance, that if the violinist isn't accompanied by the cello, you can do nothing. You can't play the symphony. And yet, each of them collaborate with each other. Or like a games field, in which a team game, in which you have to mix your individual aspirations to score the goals or the cricket runs with a desire to be part of a team. If there's too much individualism, it doesn't work. If there's too much collaboration, if you pass the ball straight away, the team doesn't get anywhere. So it's that exact balance. And in fact, clubs are a sort of team game, but played in conversation, whereas other kinds of physical games are played on sporting fields. It's no association, therefore, no coincidence, therefore, that in the 18th century, these two inventions, British clubs and British games, team games, almost all of the team games in the world were invented in Britain, cricket, football, etc., etc. And these two things have spread widely. And it's because they've spread so widely that they've become almost invisible to us and have not been noticed much by historians. The clubs and the games of Britain of the 17th, 18th century immediately spread to America, and then from America they've spread around the world. The world is now united by British games and full of the associations, clubs, guilds, colleges, recreational groups, philanthropic societies which were invented in England. It's no coincidence that if you go into any small town in any part of the world, you'll find Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, Lions Clubs, Oxfam, etc., 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 or their equivalents. And many of them invented here out of that ability to unite and yet keep your separate identity. Now, this is not the total explanation of the Industrial Revolution, but without that peculiar social organization, which had developed out of features of English society, for instance, the large middle class, the quite high literacy rates, the large concentration into London, the legal framework which gave people confidence, the freedom of expression, all those things allowed the clubs to develop. And when they developed, they provided a forum for a new kind of social cooperativeness, without which you can't have the modern world. So here we are. There were all sorts of clubs in 18th century England, but one of the clubs which represents best the connection between clubs and science and industry was the Lunar Society. This was founded by Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, and it used to meet once a month on the full moon for 6 hours from 2 o'clock till 8 o'clock, and people would sit round and have a kind of seminar on some topic of current interest. Well, the seminars would have been fascinating. They were given by some of the greatest inventors and industrialists of the 18th century. For instance, Wedgwood, Josiah Wedgwood, the potter, was a member, and he would talk about problems in pottery, to which Joseph Priestley, the chemist, would offer his solutions. Or again, James Watt, the inventor of the steam engine, the modern steam engine, would be there, and he would talk about problems of the steam engine and how you were going to distribute it and make it. And Matthew Boulton, the greatest 18th century iron master, was a member of the society, and he'd say, well, why don't we go into partnership then? So you can imagine the kind of conversations that went on between academics and businessmen and craftsmen discussing problems. What was really special about this was a mixture of enthusiasm and curiosity and trust. The curiosity is shown by a rather nice story. On one meeting at Mrs. Galton's house, in the middle of the meeting, suddenly a large black snake crawled out from underneath the table. And Mrs. Galton said to her 10-year-old daughter, "Annie, go and get the snake." And she rushed over and picked up this snake. And it emerged that one of the members on the way to the meeting had found this sleepy snake and thought that it was probably dead, and brought it in his case, left it under the table, forgotten about it, because he was going to dissect it later. So the snake came out and was given to the intrepid young lady. The only recorded observation about this is from the butler, who went back to the servants' hall afterward and said, "What else do you expect of all those lunatics?" So this is the kind of lunatic conversations and activities that went on, playfully, sportingly, but also very seriously. And out of those collaborations and cooperation that you get in a club like the Lunar Society, you get the seeds developing of an industrial revolution.